What is the application of the Internal Revenue Code as far as citizens within the states of the Union? Voluntary compliance and self-assessment. And what does the IRS tell you? It comes under voluntary compliance and self-assessment. Now, to go one step further, I've told you many times to get proof of this, that you go to the index of the United States Code, right? Go to the law library. Remember I've told people that go to the law library, go to the index, but you have to go to the annotated code index. And it has a general index. Here it is right here. You go to the law library, it's the way to look. United States Code annotated, 1994 general index. And what we have here in the index is C. In the index of the United States Code, it'll tell you all the law pertaining to citizens. It tells you where to go and what does it mean. All right, it starts down here. The word citizen. Citizens Air Training Camps. You go to Title 10, which is what? What is Title 10?
Air traffic control?
No. National Rifle and Pistol matches open to members. What is Title 10 of the code? How many titles are in the United States Code? 50. They're topical, right? Remember, Title 12 is banking, Title 29 is labor, Title 31 is money. All right? Title 20 is education.
Is Title 10 guns and ammunition?
Title 10 is armed forces. Okay? So Title 10 is armed forces, right? So when you want to see where citizens air training camps, the law pertaining to that, you go to Title 10 section 4312. And it'll tell you all the law about that, right? Now you want to come over here. Oh, here's citizens right here, see? Just the word citizens alone. See citizenship, generally this index. So everything pertaining to just the word citizen, you got to go to the word citizenship to follow that through. Okay, now let's go to the next page and we'll follow citizenship. Citizenship starts right here. Now I'm going to ask for your help. We're going to go down here and what's the title of the Internal Revenue Code? Title 26, right, is the Internal Revenue Code. What's the title of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms?
27.
So we have 26 and 27, right? Now I'm going to ask for your help because we're dealing with citizens and citizenship now. Let's go find those titles. We have 8, 36, 8, 8, 8, 10, 10, 8, 10, 8. Come on down, 22. Anybody see any 26? All right, let's come over here. We're coming down 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8. Right on down. Where's it? Come on down there. I don't see any. There's 5, 16, 47. Well, let's go to the next page. Citizenship goes on. Come on down, 26. No, we got 14, 2. Going down, 47, 47, 18, 10, 8, 22, 46, 8, 5, 18, 22, 12. Oh, Lord, where are we at? You see any? There's 12 again. 16, 22. Interesting, huh? Now where are we going to find 26, right? Let's go further. We got 18, 30, 20. Hey, 26. 2501. All right, what's section 2501 is what? What subtitle?
Subtitle
B.
Residents of possessions considered citizens or non-residents not citizens. Now that's the only 26 we saw so far, right? All right, now let's come on down and see if we can find any more 26s. 25, 25, 8, 42, 25, 25, 25, 15, 8. Come up here. 22, 22, 22, 22, 19, 20, 28, 8, 20. Oh, here's 26. What is it? Same code section. 2501. Gift tax, avoidance of tax. Right on down. You see any more? 25, 46, 18. Let's go on. There has to be somewhere, doesn't it? Huh? 42, 12, 20, 36, 16, 16, 42, 8, 5, 2, 48, 42, 8, 18, 5, right on down, 8, up 36, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 22, 22, 35, 18. I'm on down 30, 42, 8, 48, 48, 45, 22. Where's the citizens in the union like the IRS says? Huh? 28, 22, 18, 18, 8, 29, 29. You know what? When you're actually digging in for law and doing research, it's not what is said, it's what's not said. That means everything, right? Because when you're dealing with law, you're dealing with something that's positive. People will call up and they'll say, show me where it says that I'm not required. I said, well, there is no such thing in the law because law is positive, it's not negative. It only says what is required. Everybody understand? 29, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 7, 18, 16, 22, 28, 42, 28, 18, 16, 8, 36, 8, 8, 8, 22. So far, how many have we had? Two. And none of them dealt with citizens in the states, have they? Look at that. I can't find any more. How about that? I just can't find any more. Maybe we might have one more page here of citizenship. Citizenship Day. Oh, Citizenship Day, that's it. Right, one item on the page. Evidently we ran out, so we have the citizens within the code, only one section, that's 2501, right? And it deals with who? Citizens in the possessions. Now let's go to the same index, right? But we're going to I to L. We're going to I for what? Income. We got one page. No problem at all. Here we go. One page for income. In fact, it's income tax. Here it is, income tax citizens. See it? About to depart from the United States, or the U.S. Waiver of requirements as to termination of taxable year. 266851. What is that? Where's that at? 60. That's in subtitle F. That's right. Administration and procedures. Living abroad, exclusion of earned income and foreign housing costs from gross income, 26,911. Now, where does it show states of the Union? Interesting, isn't it? That's what I was telling people. Before I went down, I just wrote down there, I said, I think I'll go down and get that so we can see this, because I've been telling people for years, if you can find citizens within the states of the Union in that index, I'll give you $1,000. I wouldn't have said that if I knew what I was talking about.
John, to help drive that one home, that it only appears, or the code for the income tax only applies to the aliens, do the same thing. Would cross-reference aliens, look under income tax. Look under income tax for aliens. And after you do that, you get 4, 5, 6 pages listing deductions, withholding, what
That's
you can
right.
subtract, the whole 9 yards.
That's right.
Only those two mentions of section 2501 for citizen. But you get 6, 7, 8,
Everything-
8,
everything for
underneath the
aliens.
sun for aliens.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it continues to say that Subtitle A, Income Tax Chapters 1 through 6 is a foreign tax imposed under tax treaties. If you would go to Title 21, you know what Title 21 is? Anybody know what Title 21 is? Title 21 is the FDA. What's the FDA? Huh? What's the FDA, Doc?
Food and Drug Administration.
Food and Drug Administration, right? If you go there and research, I can show you. I've been doing it in my spare time. Once a month I get into that. I've been doing it. You know what I found?
Go by treaties.
Jurisdiction at all.
That's under treaties. I found that the directors of the FDA have no authority within the states. They can't go into anybody's office. You know where their authority is? Their authority, to the extent of it, is confined to ports of entry.
For stuff coming into the country.
The stuff coming into the country at a port of entry, and they don't go beyond the port of entry. It's under a tax treaty. What I have found through my research over the years is that the government is instituting treaties with foreign countries and just making the citizens believe that they pertain to them within the Union and letting them involve themselves, or letting the agents of the government believe they have the authority that they don't. These agents are not doing wrongful acts by and large. They believe they have authority which the law does not give them. They would have to do that with them. They have to mislead them. There not many men would continue on like that out of nothing else but self-preservation, because they wouldn't want to be sued for their acts. Believe me, when I was on the police force, that was a large concern for us. We couldn't get any insurance, and they would not allow us to start a fund to pool anything to help one another. We couldn't do that. And we would constantly worry about a false arrest suit.
Why would they let you start a fund?
They wouldn't do it. They said it would be against the law for us to have such a fund. Well, didn't you see before remember Edwin Meese? All right? Edwin Meese was what?
Reagan's advisor.
No, he was what? Attorney General under Reagan. Okay? And he published just before he left that office. Remember, he left the office, he had to resign because there was a scandal breaking, which they finally covered up and he got away with it. But he left that office, and before he left that office, he said he wanted to start a fund for federal agents who were sued for violation of rights so that they wouldn't be injured and it wouldn't deter them in doing their job. Huh? It would not deter them in, well, what is he telling them to do? Go out and violate the rights of citizens.
Break the law.
Break the law. Interesting, isn't it?
John,
Is that a violation of his oath also? Sure.
Well, I imagine it is because he took an oath to uphold the Constitution. So I imagine that would be a violation of his oath.
I wouldn't assume so.
Right.
Legally, under Title 21, the FDA then could only approve or disapprove stuff coming into the Port of Edwards. They would have no control over what's developed in this country.
That's
per
correct.
se.
That's correct. All you got to do is go to Title 21, and it's very clear. I have it on a diskette back in my office. I sit there and play because we have all the 50 titles on CD, and I can go into any of them and all the regs. And when I have a spare moment now and again, I pull up 21 and play with it because I know that 21 is as important as 26.
I don't know where you get the spare time.
John, in your other spare time, try DEA.
Oh yeah, right. Right. It's all under treaty. In fact, the FDA comes under a convention from 1912. That's when it was all started. I have that back there. It's all in the regs. See, that's the main line. The main line of defense is against who? Those who would take your health and those who will take your wealth. Isn't that correct? Because without either one, you're in trouble. Right? So we got to defend our health and our wealth. So we got to look into those things. We got to understand these things. Let me tell you, the most injurious things to our movement towards reestablishing constitutional government, not that it doesn't exist, it exists de jure, but not de facto. Everybody knows what I mean by that. Everybody knows. Anybody doesn't understand that because I want you. You know.
I do not.
Oh, you do not know. De jure means when government acts within the law as it's written. De facto means the government is operating outside the law, but it's a fact that they're doing these things, even though the law does not afford them the right to do it. Everybody understand that? So when the government is acting de jure, it's acting within the law as it's written. If it's de facto, it means they're doing it even though they don't have the authority, but they're getting away with it. Most of the acts of government today are de facto. If you look up a definition of anarchy, you will find that anarchy, one of the definitions of anarchy, is when a government is acting out of good manners but outside the law, which makes sense. But our government structure has never been changed. We still have a constitutional government. We still have those same rights. None of them have been taken away, except they've been worked at a little bit, like the Second Amendment has been worked at more than others. A little bit. But any which way. So the biggest thing we have to do is we have to understand thoroughly. We can't go off half-cocked and make ourselves look radical to someone. Right? We got to have the knowledge to inform others because that's the only way that we're going to get this country back. You've got to have the proper knowledge and you've got to give it right so that people can go out and understand and not phone. Let me tell you, the worst thing in the world is to tell somebody something and it's wrong. And they find out about it. Your credibility is gone. And what most people do when they start finding these things out is they want to rush out and share it right away. Well, that's fine as long as you don't go beyond what you actually know. But people have a tendency of doing that. So don't do that, right? Take your time. Get the knowledge. Know it like the back of your hand, and then tell it to others. And then your opposition melts in front of you. I mean, they cannot stand the light of day. You see? They cannot stand it. That's why the judge ran out of the courtroom just last week on me. He didn't want to stand there because I'm starting to talk about the law. And he had nothing to rebut it with except that you're wrong. Well, what does that mean? Can a judge tell you you're wrong when the law says something and what he's saying? No.
That's de facto, right?
That's de facto, right. Not only de facto, that makes him a pettifogging shyster. Now, what is that? Anybody know what a pettifogging shyster is?
He's a lawyer.
Well, a shyster could be a lawyer, but a pettifogging shyster is one more step beyond shyster. That's a shyster who uses low and mean tricks against people, taking advantage of them and their ignorance of the law. It's a petty fogging shyster. Okay?
Mistaken, it could be a prosecutor, because a lot of them do it.
Oh, yeah. Most prosecutors lie about evidence.
Right. Well,
We have an attorney who works with us. He's from California, and he used to be a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor. And he quit in disgust because he wasn't there long at all. He told them he was not going to frame anybody. He refused to do that, and he left. Right? He calls us, he works very close with us. He's calling us all the time with his advice and his aid. And in fact, all the briefs and all, we have maybe 10 lawyers around the country. Every brief that we write, we fax to them, and they all give us their feedback. It's very helpful. You know, it is. It's very helpful because a lot of things, they have the experience of all these rules. You know, the rule book's like that. Right? And rules are everything in court. If you don't follow the rules correctly, you could be right as rain, but you're going to lose. The rules are what have to be followed, yes.
Did the IRS have an audit on this fellow? Did they pull an audit on this fellow when he resigned?
No, not that I know of. He never mentioned anything about it. He's been practicing law for a long while. They might now, I don't know, but they haven't bothered him. I think the IRS has their hands full. They can't, you know, they just hired 5,000 more people. You heard that. To try to keep up with it. And the Wall Street Journal said maybe, 2 months ago, that it looks like the IRS is losing and with no possibility to regain. That was, you know, and starting to become a fact that the IRS, the people, I mean, there's so many people around that don't know what they're doing and just don't care anymore because they want to live. Not that I say that's right. It's the worst thing in the world. You should know the law. And we constantly tell the IRS. In fact, I just sent a letter off to the IRS this week. Might have been Thursday, inviting them in again. And we told them, you know, that we want them to come in to make sure that what we're saying is right about the law, because we don't want to violate any law. And we said that we're cognizant of the fact that a lot of people don't understand the law, including Shirley Peterson, who's an ex-commissioner of IRS, which she said publicly in his speech that she don't understand the Internal Revenue Code. And we said that, you know, we don't want to be in violation of the law, so we realize that it's a very complex law, and we would appreciate them coming in to make sure what we're saying is right. There's no way do we want to be outside the law. Of course, we want to show them, to show us where we're wrong in all these things that we've been showing here tonight. Okay, we want them to do that. Well, anyway, we also started, Save a Patriot started a subsidiary called National Workers' Rights Committee. And what we do is we started a committee to write to employers to try to inform them of the law. Now, the mindset of the American population being what it is, of course, our rate of success is not as great as our rate of failure with the National Workers' Rights Committee. But we do have a lot of success. It's my understanding that Taco Bell, we finally broke through Taco Bell, and they have on their applications now that they accept statements of citizenship. Okay? When they hire people.
Certificate.
So, right, a certificate, a statement says certificate. So there's other things that they have on there. So we are making, and you know, nothing changes overnight. Don't expect that. You got to be patient. And you got to reason with people. You know? And when you do that, you know, you have people who are principled, and you're dealing with people who are principled, maybe like Taco Bell, and you're dealing with people who have fear of the government. You won't do anything with them because they fear the government. You're dealing with people who have cheated all these years and are afraid of getting caught now, and they won't dare want to bring attention to themselves. Right? And you're dealing with people who believe that they have to do these things. So you're dealing with a lot of different types of people, and you got to be patient when you do that. And, it's understanding. But as more people start to see the law, what happens? We start gaining our freedoms back. And it'll go to others because and it'll start not with the large employer. It won't start with all these conglomerates like Grumming and all these different big companies. No, because most of them are intertwined in all these government contracts. It starts with a little employer who says, well, if I don't have to do this, why am I doing it? Why am I collecting these taxes if I don't have to? And taking and turning them in, and I don't turn them in, they don't like the way I turn them in, they fine me. And it winds up costing me money. And why do I have to do this, you see? And when these people start finding out, what happens? I had a guy call up this past week. He employed 21 people. And he says, tell me how to do it. They're all interested. And I am too, very much. I said, well, I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just going to tell you what the law says. And I showed him the different law. In fact, I faxed him the law. Now, he can follow the law because we don't advise anybody what to do. You didn't hear me tonight advising anybody what to do. I'm just telling you facts about the law and little things that happen. So, anyway, that's all over the country. And what happens is, when these employees tell other people, well, my employer don't withhold from me, what's going to happen? First thing you know, they're going to talk to other ones, and as time goes on, it's on our side. The only thing we have to fear is if these socialists that are in our administration now become to the point where they want to grab control, then we're in trouble. But I don't know about that. Listening to Gordon Liddy, he doesn't think so. Everybody heard what Gordon Liddy's been, he's a talk show, right? Remember Gordon Liddy, the plumber? Right? Anybody doesn't know who Gordon Liddy, the plumber is? I think everybody knows about Gordon Liddy. He's the man who worked with Nixon on the Watergate thing. And at that time, he was on TV and he put a cigarette out in his hand. Remember that? I couldn't get over that. Just did that. I was man. But anyway, he has a talk show now. And Nancy and I were coming back from Virginia last Tuesday. And we were listening to Gordon Liddy coming up through D.C. and in the Baltimore Beltway. And while we were listening, an FBI agent called into him and was telling him what a disservice that he was doing by talking about people shooting BATF agents. Because he's telling the BATF, don't you come around looking for these guns. There's 40 million Americans who own guns in the United States, and I'm sure there's a lot more of them than you, and you better watch out because they're going to be getting you when you start collecting their guns. So the FBI agent was telling him what a disservice. Gordon Liddy was in the FBI. He was an FBI agent. And he says, so he starts talking to the gentleman, and he says, well, what is your beliefs about the Second Amendment? Do you take the Second Amendment literally? And the agent says, yes, I do, the same as you. And then he says, well, if you take it literally, these are guys over at BATF don't. All they want to do is grab everybody's guns. He says, they have no respect for the Second Amendment. Why are you teaming up with them? He said, they're government agents. So it's a we-they mentality, evidently. Right? Us and them, we-they, right. So anyway, what Liddy missed, I believe, he should have said to him, well, didn't you take an oath? Because he went on to say, well, if I have a court order, and that court order says to grab these guns, then I'm going to grab the guns no matter what it is to enforce the law, even if the law is unconstitutional. And when Gordon Liddy dropped the ball, I believe he should have said, well, didn't you take an oath to uphold the Constitution? If you took an oath to uphold the Constitution, then you realize fully that a law that is passed in violation of the Constitution does not exist. That's a principle of law. Any law that's passed that's not unconstitutional is void from the beginning. It never existed. No one has to obey it. So by you obeying an unconstitutional law, sir, you're violating your oath and committing a crime. You're in violation of Title 18, Section 241 and 242. You know what that is? Conspiracy to defraud someone of their rights under the Constitution. That's conspiracy, and he would be guilty of that by going out with his court order and collecting guns. Now, when I was on the police force, if they gave me an order to do something unconstitutional, I refused. I always did. And they never did anything to me. They went to somebody else who would do it. I would just refuse. I wouldn't do it. I'll give you an example. You know, the area that I worked, the people were fairly poor. I worked in Cherry Hill in Baltimore. And those people, you know, there were some there who were middle class, but a lot of them didn't have any money, and you knew who the bad actors were and who the good people are. And listen, I would get to know everybody, and if some guy got out of work, and he couldn't renew his tags, he didn't have the money. He couldn't renew his tags, and they would take and push the vehicle up in their yard. And they would come to me and say, I want a nuisance notice, get that guy to get his car off his property. I said, well, when this order says that he's injuring his neighbor's health by that car sitting there, then I'll enforce the order. If not, you give it to somebody else. I'm not going to do it. That's that man's property. They never argued with me. They went on to somebody else who would do it. You see? That's just one example. All that is revenue. I don't understand these side of these police today. Well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think the statute of limitations is run because I left the police force in 1965. But anyway, you know, if I saw somebody in the neighborhood who had been out of work and had just got work again and he had a family, and I noticed his tags had expired, I didn't bother him. I let him go back and forth to work. I didn't take his transportation to the job away from him. I mean, that's ridiculous. He's my citizen. He's my brother, right? I don't know where these cops come from, a lot of them today. What's wrong with them? Out there, somebody goes a few miles over, and you know, when I went through the police academy, they taught us. I guess they were different people then, I don't know. But they taught us that the proper traffic violation is speed greater than reasonable or proper. Has nothing to do with 35, 45, or 55. It's speed greater than reasonable or proper. That's the proper charge. That means if I'm on Route 27 and it's 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, maybe 6 o'clock, and there's all kinds of traffic on the road, they're coming out of side roads and all, then certainly I cannot go 65 miles an hour. The proper speed would be like 45 or 50 to 55 tops, right? But if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and there's nobody on the road, I could go 70 and not bother anybody, and that's reasonable and proper. You follow what I'm saying? I don't know where they train. They must train these guys totally different today. All it is revenue. That's all, just revenue. And you let them go, the more the government needs. The more you give it, the more it needs, because it grows. Governments grow, and all it is revenue. Now we're going to look at the request forms for the OMB control numbers under the Paperwork Reduction Act. This is a standard Form 83 from OMB. And as you can see, it's a request here under the Social Security Administration, right? And it's for Office of Retirement and Survivors Insurance. Application for Social Security number card. Replacement or correction is on an SS5 form. And it talks about Section 205C of Title 20, which is where you find the Social Security Act. You also find, for some reason, they duplicated that, and they also put it in Title 42, only instead of 205, it would be Title 42, Section 405. Would be the same thing. So you can get in either title for some reason. Now, on the reverse side of that, it tells us about the application for Social Security, and it's down in block number 24, which is down here near the bottom. of the application. It says respondent's obligation to comply. And it says required to obtain or retain a benefit. Everybody understand that? Required to obtain or retain a benefit is not mandatory. Okay? So the application for a Social Security number card is that. And of course, if you have one, you have to fill out a what? Do you have to fill out a W-4?
No.
You just say, no? No, or do you?
Volunteers do it.
All right. All right, now, does the employer have to give you a W-4 card? I mean, a form?
No.
He doesn't?
No, he has to ask you, that's it. If you say no, you,
No, he has to give you a W-4. Right. An employer who has an employer identification number, let's make that distinction. We employ people here, but we don't have an employer identification number. So therefore, we have no requirement to give anybody a W-4. But if an employer has an employer identification number, he has a requirement to give that individual he's hiring a W-4. He has a requirement also to ask him for the number on it. Right? Does the person have to give it to him?
Yes.
No.
no, no,
If he's asked, and he has one, I think he has to give it.
I
no.
don't believe
No, he
so.
doesn't.
I thought we said that he did.
No? What is, all right, does anybody remember the law involving that?
Income tax return.
Social
Anybody?
Security is a voluntary system, therefore,
Well, I understand, but what is the law dealing with the giving of a W-4 and the requirement to return it?
well,
Social Security number for you.
Does anybody remember the law for
The
that?
law says that the only obligation that the employer is required to comply with is to, in the case where an employee does not submit a Social Security number, the employer will simply notify the Internal Revenue Service that he couldn't obtain it, and he'll submit the employee's name and address.
In an affidavit form?
Yes.
Right. Well, what law is that, you know? All right, anybody who wants to check it, it's 301.6109-1, parentheses, small c. And that's found in Title 26 Code of Federal Regulations.
Say that again.
301.6109-1, parentheses, small c. It says that an employer has an obligation to give a W-4 form, but no employee has an obligation to give it back to him or give him a number.
Title what, John?
Title 26 Code of Federal Regulations. All right, now, so then it also says, as Gil said before, the employer has a further obligation, and that is to notify the Internal Revenue Service that he asked the individual employee and was refused. And then when he does that in affidavit form, his liabilities end. He has no other requirement. Now you'll hear CPAs, tax accountants, and tax attorneys will say, oh, if you don't get one, you'll be penalized. Well, if you go to 301.6676-1, it says very clearly there is no penalty for not securing a Social Security number. Okay? So that shows you that most of these people, you know, they're not all dishonest. All they're doing is repeating or parroting what they have been told and have never checked the law. They assume it to be correct because everybody does it and everybody says it. But that doesn't mean it's right. You know, you do not follow a multitude to do what? Wrongdoing, right. I prefer it that way here. Yes, somebody was,
In the event that you apply for a check cashing service and they claim that the submission of a Social Security number is required, do you follow the same process, or does the law?
a check cashing service? Well, when you're dealing,
Such as supermarkets, for example.
well, when you're dealing with a private business, the law does not come into play. That might be their policy. It's best to be diplomatic because they are told and they believe they have to do these things. And then even banks, if you want to buy a money order from the bank, they'll ask you for a Social Security number if it's over 3,000 or whatever. And because they have to fill out this form, this currency transaction form. And if you say to them, you'll say, well, why do you need that? I don't have one. They say, well, you have to have one. I'll say, well, I don't have one. Why do you need it? Well, it's the law. Well, could you show me the law? And then they'll usually, if you're in a branch, they'll call the main office, and then they'll come back and they'll say, well, it's our policy. See, they change it from law to policy. But what we have to do is we got to get people to understand the damage that number is doing. When I was a young man, nobody asked you for a Social Security number when I first got married. It's only been the last 10 years or so they started all that. And the reason why is because without that number, they cannot set up a world government. Without that number, the whole thing falls apart, and there's no need to have it. That's why they're fighting so hard for people to get it and keep it. Like I said before, the Internal Revenue Service cannot even set up a file without that number. And you know something else? We can't find any law authorizing the Internal Revenue Service to keep a file on anybody except their own personnel, their own employees. We're constantly asking them for the law that authorizes them to keep file on people, and they can't give it to us. They keep sending the one that says they're employees. And then what we do is we'll underline and say, well, it says employees, and we'll send it back to them. And we'll say, show us where citizens are there. Would you please underline it or highlight it and send it back to us? We can't find it. It doesn't exist. You see? So without that number, they couldn't do it. They couldn't even write you a letter. Yes.
How about you have your Social Security number and you want to no longer participate in Social Security? How would you go about having that number stricken from your name?
Well, that's what we're getting into now. Right on cue. Okay. Now, back in 1985, I did personally an affidavit of revocation and rescission. Now what that means, you do an affidavit to revoke an act that you've committed. And the rescission means you're rescinding your signature from that act. Because in order to commit an act that binds you, you've got to sign your name on something. So I did an affidavit of revocation and rescission revoking all past tax returns, claiming that I believed at the time I was filing them that I had a requirement, and now it's my understanding that none exist. Therefore, I am revoking all those returns and rescinding my signature from them, and also the Form SS5 application for Social Security number card. Now, the law is that if an agency jurisdiction is challenged, then that agency has to rebut that challenge. See, all this started with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, with his New Deal. This is the New Deal that we're seeing the fruits of. And at that time, some of you might not remember unless you're old as I, or if you're a history buff, you wouldn't know. But did you ever hear the term that Roosevelt was going to pack the courts? Remember, you ever hear that? Well, what was happening, these justices sitting on the Supreme Court wouldn't go along with this socialist schemes. And they were knocking these laws as fast as Congress could pass them. They were declaring them unconstitutional. So there is no magic number in the Constitution as to how many justices sit on the Supreme Court. It's not there. So what Roosevelt threatened to do, he threatened to put up to 15 or 30 justices on there so he could pack the court with his own people to pass these programs. So of course, if they did that, then the court would be a joke.
Like it is today.
No, just- and so what they did is they gave in and they compromised. And their compromise caused this very thing that I'm talking about now about the agency's jurisdictions. Up until that time, if an agency contended it had authority over a citizen, there had to be a law, and the agency had to show that citizen the law to make that citizen comply. But what the court did is they changed that a little bit. They said it was not incumbent upon Congress, when passing a law that involved an agency's jurisdiction over any particular citizen, to inform that citizen of how the jurisdiction arises. That it is presumed the agency has the jurisdiction, and that it's up to the individual citizen to challenge that agency's claim of jurisdiction. And when so challenged, the agency then has the requirement to rebut that challenge or lose the jurisdiction. And this flew in the face of American jurisprudence, which was innocent until proven guilty. You have then become guilty till you prove yourself innocent. But that was the compromise. That's what happened. So that's what we have to go through. So agencies are presumed to have jurisdiction whether they don't or not, and they created all this presumptive law. And that's when our problems really started going, because, most Americans are not disposed to study all this law. I mean, good gracious, it's all you can do to earn a living, much less spend your time in a law library reading all this. It's taken me years to find out these things. And you don't learn them in a day or a week. So therefore, you shouldn't have to be a Philadelphia lawyer to live here. It was never meant to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. So anyway, in Title V, which is of the United States Code, which is government agencies and employees, in 556D of that title, it says that when an agency's jurisdiction is challenged, they have to rebut it. So my affidavit was an allegation of constructive fraud against the Internal Revenue Service and Social Security Administration. And in that, I said that I was defrauded by Congress, by the news media, and everybody who had led me to believe, even my first employer, who led me to believe that I had a requirement to use this number and do these things when I didn't. Now, in order to rebut that, the agencies would have to show that I was wrong, that they did have the right to do these things. But constructive fraud is totally different than actual fraud. There's a difference. Constructive fraud comes with no penalties because there's no one you can accuse. Everybody understand that? It is actually a notice to the agency or to a person that from now on, if you can't show me the law, you better leave me alone or I will have an action against you. But if it's actual fraud, then you would actually have an action against an individual who defrauded you. So constructive fraud doesn't mean that when you do it, it eradicated all those things. For instance, if you had filed a return and signed under penalty of perjury saying that you owed $1,000, that affidavit wouldn't negate that. You would still owe the $1,000. But from then on, it changes. Everybody understand that? So that's what constructive fraud means. All right. So now they had to rebut that. So here's the letter. They gave notice to the Secretary of the Treasury at the time of my affidavit. Notice that I say it was December the 2nd, 1985. James Baker was the Secretary of the Treasury. Dear Mr. Secretary, would you please be so kind as to forward the enclosed affidavit to the appropriate governmental office so that proper notice can be taken there of its content. Well, what's its content? Notice of constructive fraud, right? All right. And suitable action to comply with its mandate therewith. So that office is either to rebut it or comply with its mandate, which is, I'm revoking everything. Now, they have to rebut this, right? Now, the affidavit's 14 pages, 12 pages, or something like that. 7 pages? So, all right, 7 pages. It's been a long time. 7 pages long. And then it contained all these statements. And it contained statements about the code and my understanding of it, so they would have to say that these things are wrong. Just like I asked the judge, but instead of answering me, he ran out of the court. You're wrong. Well, anybody can say that. Show me where I'm wrong, right? That's different. So anyway, I received a reply. All right, the reply came back April the 17th, 1987. All right? Okay. Dear Mr. Cotmar, your letter to Mr. James A. Baker III, Secretary of the Treasury, and the affidavit of revocation and rescission enclosed therewith have been forwarded to this office for handling. Please be advised that the necessary action has been taken to incorporate this affidavit with your file, and the information contained in the document has been duly recorded with the Internal Revenue Service. We appreciate this opportunity to serve you. What did he say?
Nothing.
He redid it.
Comply with the mandate.
Oh, what did he say? He said nothing?
He
Comply
accepted
with the
it.
mandate.
He accepted it.
He accepted it.
He complied with the mandate, which was what? To recognize it as fact. It was not rebutted. And he put it in writing and signed his name. Who is he? He's Joseph H. Clunan, Director of the Philadelphia Service Center. He's still there today. He's still the Director of the Philadelphia Service Center. Quite possibly, maybe he didn't advance anymore. Huh? Interesting, isn't it? Not very many people have gotten these letters since then. Now they send off-point letters talking about the mission of the IRS is to achieve the highest voluntary compliance, or we don't answer on a point-by-point basis, or some other thing of that nature, but they never come back and rebut anything. They have never until this day. But nobody's received any more of these. In that same year, 2 special agents came out and rapped on the door, and I was in the office working, and my wife said to me, somebody's at the door. And I went down, looked out, and there wasn't anybody there. And I went upstairs and looked out again, and I saw 2 special agents who I recognized from the IRS getting in their car. So I hollered out the window, "What do you want, Ronald?" "Can I see you, Mr. Cotmar?" All right, so I went downstairs and opened the door, and he walked up onto the stoop, and he says, I'm informing you under criminal investigation, I want to read you your rights. I said, "I don't want to hear all that, Ronald," and I shut the door and went upstairs. So I sat down and I wrote him a letter, a very nice letter. I said, "I didn't mean to be rude to you or shut the door in your face, but you cannot come to my house uninvited. If you want to make an appointment and come see me, do such, but don't come unannounced." Now, I have here a letter from Mr. Joseph Clunan of the Philadelphia Service Center, who received my affidavit of revocation and rescission, and he says that it was complied with. Now, I would like to know what your business is and what authority you have to investigate me. And we went from there. All right? So as time went on, I heard less and less from them. What would happen, see, they would go to other people and try to talk to them. They went to a fellow who I was renting some property from, and he came to me. He said they come over and wanted to know all the details about what you're doing. And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah." He says, "I told them if they want to know what you're doing, they ought to go ask you." And I showed him to the door. And, that's all people have to do. You know, we have a girl working here who worked in fact, she drives from Columbia, Pennsylvania. You know where Columbia, Pennsylvania is? It's just this side of Lancaster. And she drives down here every day to work here. And she used to work in Columbia. And this IRS revenue officer, who has the authority for what? Subtitle E. Come into the place where she was working and started harassing her and telling her boss that she owes money and all this stuff. And finally, it got so bad that the boss fired her rather than to stand up to the IRS. So she called up and I said, sure, we could use someone here. And she drives all the way down here. Well, about 4 weeks ago, that same IRS revenue officer followed her from Columbia, Pennsylvania, all the way down here into this lot where she parked her car. And I pulled up and I saw the car and I saw the lady talking to her, but I didn't pay any much attention. I just saw somebody talking to her. And the girl's very nervous, a nice girl, very nervous. When she came into the office, she was crying and I was shaking like a leaf. And I said, what's wrong? She says, that was an IRS agent out there talking to me, threatening me, telling me she's going to follow me here every day. I said, well, she says she's gone. I said, well, why didn't you say something to me? She said, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. And she stood there crying, so I consoled her a little bit. And I had one of the caseworkers write the IRS revenue officer a letter. I said, look, when you come down to visit, don't be rude and stay outside. Come on in. Come on in. We'll be glad to sit down and talk to you about all the problems that you think that have arisen with Mrs. So-and-so. But they didn't answer, and she didn't bother to follow her anymore. I guess she followed her and found out where she was working and didn't want to come back. That was the difference. We said, come on in, I mean, we love them to come here. We keep inviting them, and they won't. And it's the funniest thing. When they came here in December, after spawning 2 of our invitations, and they came in with all these flak vests on, and machine guns, and shotguns, and automatic pistols, and swarming all over the place. They must have thought we were dangerous people. They were afraid of our paper bullets or something. But, when they brought all the property back last week, this week really, they brought all the property back. They didn't have all that. Now, I don't understand. We're not dangerous anymore? I mean, what's the difference? We haven't changed any. We're the same. How come they didn't come back the same way? I think that's a good question, don't you? What changed that made them act differently? We didn't change at all. I think I'm going to write and ask them, what event took place that you didn't come back the same way you did on December the 10th? Right? I mean, it's ludicrous.
There weren't as many cameras. There weren't as many cameras outside.
Yeah, there wasn't as many cameras outside, and the media wasn't here. But there was cameras here recording them, which they didn't care for, and they couldn't say a word about, and they didn't like it at all, because they were on video the whole time. And they were really getting nervous about those video cameras with all these close-ups on them, They don't like that. That's one thing about this guy who signed his name to everything. They hide. They don't let people know where they are. So the first thing we did is we found out where he lived. And we sent all the copies of all the pleadings to his house. In fact, when I sent notice under Title 18, Section 4 to Janet Reno, the Attorney General of the United States, giving her notice of his crimes for him to be prosecuted, I sent that to his house too. I'm sure his wife likes getting all this stuff because they like to keep them away from that, So, let me tell you, they're not invincible. In fact, you know what? We have a case right now where it's a lot of fun. We sued on behalf of one of our members. We sued this revenue officer And come to find out, when they answered, they had to admit that he was using an alias. Here he is claiming under an alias that this man owes money and signing liens and all under an alias and encumbering property under a name that is not his own. Isn't that fun? We just love them. Huh? So anyway, they seemed to slow down and things were dying out. So one day I said to my wife, I said, you know, I believe that this investigation is over. It's been quite a while since I heard from him. So what I did was I requested my individual master file. See the date of the master file, 8/16/89. It was December of 87 when they came out to the house. So anyway, I got this master file, and the first thing I did is I come down and I looked. And here's the 914 transaction code starting a criminal investigation. See, that was on November the 3rd, 1987. Right? Now we come over here. Here's the document locator number that is the controlling number for the document that was used to start the criminal investigation, which has a blocking series of 300, which we're going to get into. Everybody remembers the structure of document locator numbers, right? How many people in here do not know what a document locator number is? All right. Okay, we'll take a minute then and we'll explain a document locator number. A document locator number identifies a single document that is used by the Internal Revenue Service. It tells you everything about that document. The first two digits tells you the office that it originated in. So 52 is Baltimore. 28 is Philadelphia. See, here's one from Philadelphia right there. The next digit tells you the tax class. 2 is income tax. The next two digits tells you the document itself. It's the document code. The next 3 digits tells you the date that it was executed on. So it's called the Julian date. Now, the Julian date is 365 days of the year. Which day is it, right? Well, you say, if that's the Julian date, what's that doing with 707? There's not 700 days in a year, right? Well, what happens is if the IRS executes 2 documents for a single person, and those documents can be confused with one another within the computer, what they do is they add 400 to one of them to separate them, see? So this would actually be the 307th day of the year. Okay? Now the next 3 digits is called a blocking series. What that means is the explanation of the use of the document. Such as if it was an audit, it would be examination, it would be an audit examination form, see? It would tell you what the use of the document is. The next 2 digits tells you the location of the document on the 813 index form, which is kept in the accounting branch of the IRS as the hard copy. In other words, on the 813, they attach 100 documents to each 813, which has an index of all the documents attached on its face. And they go from 00 to 99, being 100 documents. This here would be the second document on the 813 at 01. The last digit tells you the year, which is 1987. All right, so in a little while, we're going to be examining this document locator number. Now, as we go down here, we see there's a transaction code of 912. 912 reverses a 914 or ends a criminal investigation. So this says on 8/16/89 that the criminal investigation ended on 10/6/88. Just shy of 1 year from when it started. Now, 10/6/88 is a very significant date. It's my birthday. I was born on October the 6th. Okay? So, I don't know. I kind of like to think of it like the pilots in World War I, you know. This one's yours and wave at one another. Quite possibly it isn't, but old Ronald E.G., he might have just said, okay, John, this one's yours. So anyway, here's the document locator number. That's the controlling factor for this form that was used to end the investigation. See it? Right there, and it's the same thing. It was both of them were in Baltimore. Right? Both of them had the same document locator number. And of course, we come down to the MF Stat 06, which means no liability for any tax. That's what MF Stat 06 means. And the Z freeze is gone. Remember earlier I showed you and the Z freeze was there. The Z freeze is going. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the document 6209 that decodes IRS computer codes rather. And we have here returns processing adjustment blocking series. That's the 3-digit blocking series we were talking about, which is what, 300. Remember 300? Service center processing of taxpayer accounts for adjustment purposes must use the following blocking series to indicate the nature of the adjustment. The return must be associated with the subsequently generated IDRS, which stands for Integrated Data Retrieval System, transaction record unless the blocking series is specified as non-refile. Now we come down here and we're under individual master file. And we come down individual master file and we find 300 to 399, it says reserved. So that means that it says it's reserved there, so we continue on. We got to go to the next page for the BMF to reach 300. So on the next page, we find 300. And here it doesn't say reserved. It says U.S.-UK tax treaty claims. Now, the problem is that the computer file that I had was an IMF file, individual master file, and this code here is a business master file. Okay? Now, if you recall, as we were discussing computer files before when we were talking about assessments, I made the statement that the individual master file was an individual master file in name only. And I showed you where the codes on there were all business codes on the individual master file. Remember we discussed and talked about CP codes. Remember the CP codes, computer paragraph codes. And we showed you where individual CP codes have how many digits? 2, right? And that business master file CP codes have how many digits?
3.
And all the CP codes that we went to had how many digits? 3. You're getting better all the time. All right, but now we have a contradiction here. Can we go forward and jump to a conclusion that it's a business master code, business master file code? Can we jump to that conclusion? Well, if you go into court with that conclusion, what's going to happen to you? You're going to lose. They're going to bounce you out on your ear. What do you have to do? You have to substantiate that conclusion. It's only presumed that the code they were using was a business master file code. We have to now prove it. So how do we prove that they're using a business master file code in the blocking series 300? What do we do? How do we go about doing that? Now we've reached that point in our investigation, and we have to make a decision. How are we going to do this?
You asked a question.
You gotta find out how it's applied.
Yeah, well, you got to find out. Well, that's right. And so then who do you write to ask that? Who would you write to ask what reserve means? Well, then you would, if you didn't know, you would have to go to where? You'd go to 1100 of the manual, which is organization and staffing, and look up the person up the chart to say, well, who is to answer this? And you probably wind up at public affairs. What's the purpose of public affairs? Answer questions to the citizens, right? So we'll go to public affairs, and the assistant commissioner of public affairs is Ellen Murphy. And we'll go back to Ellen Murphy and we'll say, dear Ms. Murphy, I am requesting your help in understanding the meaning of a specific term I have repeatedly encountered in the IRS document 6209. The term is reserved. To put this as a question, whenever I encounter the term reserved in the document 6209, does it mean that such numbers are set aside for future usage? Such numbers are reserved for use in another computer file, such as the IMF or the BMF? Thank you very much for your assistance. Okay? Is that proper? Is that logical? Okay. Here's the answer. Dear Mr. Cutmar, thank you for your letter of September 1990, in which you asked, whenever I encounter the term reserved in the document 6209, does it mean that such numbers are set aside for future usage? Such numbers are reserved for the use in another computer file, such as IMF or BMF. In response to your question, the numbers that are shown in document 62 as reserved are not in current use and are set aside for future usage. Hope the information is helpful. Robert Childers, Chief Field Services Staff, Public Affairs. Now, what do we substantiate? That the Blocking Series 300 has to do with U.S. United Kingdom treaties. Because that's the only 300 in use in the whole 6209, and it had to be a business master file. We just substantiated again that the IMF is IMF in name only, and it is another business code, right? All right. What does it mean now? Let's go and see what it means. All right. In order to do that, we have to go to Chapter 3 of the manual. Extracting, sorting, and numbering. And we come down here and we find blocking series under Chapter 3, and we find 300 to 319. And that identifies the form. So now we've identified that the form that they used or are talking about is 8288 form. Now we have a form number. So from there we go and investigate what is 8288 form. Is everybody following this logic? In order to find out what that form is, we go to Chapter 3 again, this time in the Law Enforcement Manual. Now, you don't go down to IRS and pick these manuals up. It took us a year to get this baby here. We had to sue them for it. And every one of them, these like this, they don't lay them out for you. You got to sue them for it. In our CD, this manual's not there. That's because we have a sunshine government. Right? They let us know everything, see? All right, now, as we come down to the forms, we find that 8288 form is FIRPTA, Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Account. So now we know that it's under a tax treaty with the United States and the United Kingdom, and the form has to do with a foreign investment real property tax account. So there had to be a foreign investment somehow, and real property had to be involved. Well, how would that apply? Well, if they're charging me with a violation of not filing that return, which they'd be investigating me for, it can only apply one way. How would that be? I would have had to purchase a house or a property, real property, from a citizen of the United Kingdom and had not withheld the 30% when paying him for it. That's the only way that I could violate the use of that form. But I had no such transaction. And all these people that we have coming here for help, which are daily, we get new people daily and more of them. We get calls all the time, can you help me? And just about every one of them, except one, in all my years of looking at their computer files, have I seen anything other than a 300 blocking series. And that was one time it was a 295, it was a 250, I'm sorry. And I said to the fellow, I said, what the world did you do? You filed a 1040X. He said, how'd you know that? I said, because you got a blocking series on your 914 transaction code of a 250, which is a 1040X. He says, how about that? He said, people, you get these things, how are you supposed to read them? Right? Well, we had some people say, will you send me my computer file in a comprehensive form? We don't say that. We say, we want the computer files in their original raw form because we want to decode them ourselves. We don't want to take your word for what you're saying. Because we found out they're not the most honest people in the world. But anyway, here I'm being investigated for some kind of a property transaction with a foreigner. And what do we have involved again? It said tax class 2, which is income tax. A foreign tax. It's a treaty. The only authority they have to investigate is U.S. citizens of foreign countries and non-resident aliens at home. And here, when they started the investigation, their codes check out that it has to do with foreign tax, which is their authority. Over and over and over again, it proves itself. Interesting, isn't it? All right, we'll go to OMB now. And we'll check out their register of approved forms. And we come down here on the register of approved forms from the Office of Management and Budget under the Paperwork Reduction Act. We come back down and we find, where are we at here? Right here. OMB control number 15450902. 8288, 8288A are the forms. U.S. withholding tax return for dispositions by foreign persons of U.S. real property interests, statement of withholding of the dispositions by foreign persons of the U.S. So it has to do just what I said, didn't it? Withholding a tax on with a foreign national on the exchange of real property. And that's what they were charging me with or investigating me for the violation of. If I had been charged, that would be the charge. But when they go to court, would they show the jury an 8288 form? No. What form would they show the jury? A 1040 form. And for years, they've been charging people for committing crimes that didn't exist and putting them in jail. And they're doing it daily. That's why our human rights ratings are dropping like crazy. Did you know it was just announced that the state of Texas has more prisoners in its prisons than any country in the world? I don't know about you, but I find that rather alarming. More than any country in the world. What is going wrong here? And the fellow who said this on the air praised it because he said that crime went down 30% in Texas. Well, sure. But just think about that. Now, when I was in a federal prison camp, there was a lot of guys there who didn't commit any crime that were there. I wonder how many of those people in Texas actually committed a crime. More and more we see with these DNA tests and all where people are being released because they've been in prison for years for not committing the crime. You know, it's easy for people to say, like Helen Bentley says, I'll put them all away. But let her backside go sit there when she's sitting there for a crime that wasn't committed once. Let me tell you, I did 17 months and 5 days, maxing out a 2-year sentence, and I didn't commit a crime, and that's not any fun at all. That was that time out of my life for doing nothing. And I don't care who it is. You know, you get this mentality, and it's easy to go beyond with it, believe me. Little story, when I was on the police force, I got this call one time right down there where the ballpark is now. It's on Sharp Street. Of course, then it was a pretty rough neighborhood. And this woman was standing on the sidewalk, and I pulled up to where she was standing. She was crying and going on. I was just mugged. And she gave me a description. And she said it was a black male so high, and he had a silver dollar-like size scar on the back of his neck. And so I told her to get into the back of the radio car, and my partner and I was driving. We went down the street, and there was a place called a Jumbo store where they all used to hang in there, these young fellas. They used to, in the neighborhood, they called them jitterbugs. And all the jitterbugs would be in there. So I pulled down there, and I went inside and looked around, you know. And of course, when the man comes in, that's what they call us, the man, you know. They all get quiet, and they're looking like this. And I saw one of them in there, had a scar in the back of his neck. So I called him aside, and then we called the wagon, and we kept him isolated from the woman who got mugged, because you can't let them see him. If you do, you lose your case if he's your man. You see? So you can't let the woman who got mugged see the person you arrested. Okay? So then the wagon came, and we put him in the wagon. He went to the station house, and we booked him under suspicion, an investigation. And then we carried her over, and then we carried her up to headquarters up downtown Baltimore. Used to be on Fayette Street at that time. And we had a lineup, and we put him in the lineup. And she picked him out of the lineup. Okay? So we convicted him, and he went to jail for assault and robbery. And he was in jail maybe 6 months when one of my informants come to me and was telling me I had the wrong man. So I always was a person who loved liberty, you know, and even when I put somebody in a cell, I used to think about how I would feel if I was there. You know, I always had this in my mind. And so I started working on the case again. And Lord and behold, the evidence showed I did have the wrong man. He was the wrong guy. All she did was pick out a scar, you know. So I got the word for the other guy, and I went in to see the judge to get a warrant, because I had to see the judge because I had to straighten it out. And when I went in and laid it all out to the judge, he looked at me and he says, "What are you, a crusader?" And I got hot. And man, I started mouthing off in the courtroom. I was really giving a fit, and it was then it was magistrates, you know, and the captain's office is right across the hall. And I got so loud that he came in there and ordered me out. He took me over to the office and said, "I'd keep it up, he's going to fire me." But I mean, I got hot. Who is this guy to say that man should sit there? And they wouldn't let me reopen it up. And that guy did time for something I know he didn't do, just because they didn't want to be bothered. And that goes on all the time. All the time. I mean, we have more injustice in this country than you can shake a stick at, and all the public knows is they're being mugged on the street, which is wrong, don't get me wrong. But you just don't put everybody away. You make sure you got the right person. I would rather let 100 people go than make sure I got one guilty one. I'd rather see the guilty one go. That's the way justice was in this country. Unless we had a prima facie case against them. I mean, good Lord, it was just a couple years ago that some of these men out in California, they were convicted of murder and they never had a corpse. How can they do that? They never had a body, and they convicted these men, and they're in jail, a life sentence without parole, and they never produced a corpse. Just think about that. That could happen to anybody in this room. All they got to do is allege that you committed some kind of murder and somebody's missing or something and put you away if they can show circumstantial evidence. It's dangerous. It's a threat to our liberties, and we better start waking up to that stuff. I'm showing you how easy it is to get framed by the IRS and the Justice Department. Let me tell you, it goes further than that. Here's the Form 8288. U.S. withholding tax return disposition of foreign persons of real property interest. So I never had it full with any one of those things, and I never had any transactions. Now, in 1991, we got a 6209, and this is what happened. I started checking it out. Now, we didn't get it in 1991. They come out every year. And this is a 1991 6209, but by the time we got it, it was 1993. Because you have to sue for it, and they're always late in putting them out. And by the time they come out and you go through that, it's a couple years later when you get them. So what I did was I checked the blocking series again, and I found out in 1991 they changed it under the IMF. 310 reserved, and 300 is now barred assessment, CP 55. Now, CP 55, that's 2 digits, right, which is individual. Generated, valid for MFT 30. MFT 30 means income tax, 1040 return. So now it's valid for a 1040, but it's a barred assessment. N29, effective July 1991. Well, what does barred assessment mean? Prohibited. So if you have a 1040, which is MFT 30, of course it's prohibited. Because we just saw that when we were going through the assessment part of the program, right? Remember that? Where you couldn't find 1040s and delinquent returns. 5200 of the manual, the 1040 wasn't there. Every place we traced 1040, it wasn't there. But now we have barred assessments, whatever that means. So now when they put a 300 in the individual master file, it'll come under a CP 55, but it'll be a barred assessment. So what are they investigating? A non-assessment. I don't know. Then we go over to the business master file, and we come down to 300, and what does it say? Barred assessment, CP 155 generated. So it comes back to a barred assessment. Then the tax treaty dropped down to 390 and 398. But the blocking series are still 300. So the meaning of the blocking series is now changed to a barred assessment. So now they're investigating everybody for an assessment that can't be made. Now you got to ask them what that means. I don't know. They won't answer me. Okay. Here's the most important thing of the whole talk that I'm to show you tonight. This is knowledge of the federal tax laws and that conflict in the state and federal courts. Very important that everybody has such knowledge as this. Former federal district court judge Harry Claiborne admitted that while he was a federal judge, he knew nothing of federal tax law, yet decided tax cases. In Brewston versus U.S., 5th Circuit, 1968, the court acknowledged, we must note here, as a matter of judicial knowledge, that most lawyers have only scant knowledge of the tax laws. In Lord versus Kelly, 1965, it states the judges are under IRS scrutiny. What does it mean when you have conflict of the tax laws in state and federal courts. What this actually means is that the state and federal courts cannot decide what the tax is. Shirley Peterson, who was the ex-commissioner of Internal Revenue, said she didn't understand it. She said the whole thing should be written again so it's more comprehensible and people can understand it. But it means something more than that. We have a difference in the circuits. The circuits are the courts of appeal. Some courts of appeal hold that the income tax is a direct tax on property and all the citizens owe it. Other circuits hold that it's an indirect tax and that it's applied as such, which is what the Supreme Court has held. So we have some circuits are going against what the Supreme Court said and some circuits are going with it. The circuit that we have is the Fourth Circuit in Richmond, Virginia. And that circuit holds that it's an indirect tax, and as the Supreme Court held, it's applied as an indirect tax on benefits. Okay? Now, the states are the same way. They all can't agree as to the application of the tax. The state of Maryland holds that it's an indirect tax, as we've been showing you here. That's what the Court of Appeals in Maryland has held. Other states have held that it isn't. It's a direct tax. So we have the courts can't decide what it is. What does that mean to you and me? Well, it means very clearly that we can be political about it, which we have been. That we can decide which one we agree with. And we can't get in trouble for that. Because you cannot be prosecuted for something that is political and that the courts don't understand themselves. Everybody understand that? That's what it means by knowledge of the federal tax laws and that conflict within the state and federal courts. Everybody understand that? See, even though the judges and lawyers admittedly do not know the tax laws, they sit in judgment and prosecute and or defend the average citizen. Even though this is the case, the citizen being charged with a tax crime is supposed to have more knowledge than the law professionals and is held accountable by those professionals. You understand that? See how important this is? Under the criminal law, a criminal defendant has a right to rely upon decisions of the courts. And this is a separate defense. See the Albertini case from the Ninth Circuit. But further, if these decisions concerning a specific point of law are themselves conflicting, there is an additional defense of uncertainty of the law. Everybody understand that? Everybody understand what we're reading here? The nature of the income tax is itself conflicting. At the state level, most of the state courts hold that tax is an excise, while a minority line of authority holds that it is a direct property tax. The reverse is true at the federal level, with most appellate courts holding that it is a direct tax and a minority holding that it is an excise. See the attached list. Well, we have a list that goes with this, but I'm not showing you the list. We have a list of all the cases. There's one case that's prevailing, and that's a state case. It came out of Tennessee. And that case says that no citizen can be taxed on his right to earn a living. And that's the only case that's gone beyond whether it's a direct or indirect tax from the confliction. So anybody can hold to that right now because that's the only case that's been decided in the whole United States in all these years. Everybody understand that? That's what's held right now. Since there is no doubt that this conflict is present within the cases, this demonstrates a very serious due process problem of uncertainty in the law. Everybody understand what we're reading here? You understand these terms, right? Any questions about them? We all understand them. To violate a clearly known legal duty, one must plainly know the law. But when the law itself is unclear, there correspondingly cannot be a clearly known legal duty. What kind of legal environment do we have when the law itself is uncertain? We have every right to politically complain about the split and to promote one line of authority over the other. This clearly appears to be the case with Save a Patriot Fellowship. Its members face a split in authority which makes the law uncertain. For that, the fellowship and its members have every right in the world to advocate that a particular line of authority prevails at the end of the contest over the opposing line of authority. Everybody understand that? Is it clear to you?
John,
Yes.
I'm not sure about that last line.
For that, the fellowship and its members have every right in the world to advocate that a particular line of authority prevails at the end of the contest over the opposing line of authority. In other words, for all this talk that we've been giving for all these many hours, right? We've been saying, as the court shows and what we believe the law to show, that it's an indirect tax laid on through tax treaties on foreigners or U.S. citizens in foreign countries under a treaty, being an indirect tax. That's holding to the indirect tax. And the other opposing would be a direct tax on property which the citizens would owe. I don't believe that to be the case because the Constitution cannot be in confliction with itself like the Supreme Court said. But it just shows you one more flaw in our legal system. When the Supreme Court rules, it's supposed to be settled. But here we have circuit courts under the Supreme Court, and the majority of them in rebellion against the Supreme Court, and holding that, and putting people in jail. Now, we have a real problem in the judiciary of this country. Wouldn't you say so? Okay? Now, that understood, remember what we started with. The Word of God. And we started with two words, right? Remember, what was it? Matthew 17, verses 24 through 27. And when they came to Capernaum, those who collected tribute came to Peter and said, "Does not your master pay tribute?" And Peter said, "Yes." And when they came into the house, Jesus prevented Peter, saying, "What do you think, Simon? Of whom do the kings take custom and tribute? Of their children or of strangers?" And Simon said, "Of strangers, Lord." And the Lord said, "Then the children are free." Is that right? So here the Lord God is talking about what? Custom and tribute. And here we have preachers all over this country every year preaching that you must pay tribute to who tribute is due. Every April the 15th, that's what you hear from the pulpit. What do they really know about what they're saying? I believe they know nothing of what they're saying. They certainly, to my understanding of the tax laws, have no knowledge of the tax law. They don't even have knowledge of the terms that they're using. Look what custom is. duties, tolls, or imposts imposed by the sovereign law of a country on commodities imported into or exported from the country. What's tribute? An annual or stated sum of money or other valuable thing paid by one ruler or nation to another as an acknowledgement of submission. What does that have to do with collecting internal taxation? What that was all about in Matthew 17:24 through 27, where they were Roman tax collectors collecting from Israelis a submission or tribute, or else if they didn't pay it, they would sack Israel and carry it off. And I hear preachers, so-called enlightened men of the gospel, on radio and on TV preaching that this is a temple tax. They don't even know what they're talking about. That has nothing to do with a temple tax. And I have one thing to say to these preachers, that they have the blood of a lot of citizens on their hands, and they shall answer to that before Almighty God one day. They better understand what they're talking about before they say it. We have too many people who put mouth in motion before brain goes in gear in this country. And it has to come to an end. We cannot continue on with the blind leading the blind, falling into a big hole. If we don't know what we're doing, we are doomed. What does the Bible say about tribute? You find in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 24, the hand of the diligent shall bear rule, but the slothful shall be under tribute. I think that's the problem we have in our country today. Our industries are becoming foreign-owned. We went on a holiday. What are we doing now? Good gracious. How do we occupy ourselves with a baseball strike? I mean, this is ludicrous. What kind of a society are we? You know, in Rome, they had the circus and the games. Same thing here. Yeah, we get free bread. Right? We go play games. That's all we do. You know, I sit and say, sometimes I go over to Bulger's and have breakfast, and they got a whole table of men over there, and all you hear from them was the batting average. They know everybody's batting average. They couldn't tell me what a Federal Reserve note was. They don't even know there is a Federal Reserve. I mean, what have we become? Well, we want to be as amused. You know what the word amused means? It means to sit there with nothing in your head but just being nothing and watching something. It means nothing. That's what amused means. It's amusement. We want amusement. We want nothing.
Amused. A without used thought.
Without thought, right. We just want to sit there and nothing of any value. Well, there's only one answer, and you also find that in the Bible. Galatians 5:1, it says, "Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again in the yoke of bondage." Unless we do this, we're doomed. We might want to flee to Eastern Europe before long. But I don't know what course you shall take. But as for me, I know what course I'm going to take. I'm for liberty.
Same here.
That's right.
Amen.
Right.
And if it means my death, I'm for liberty.
I'd rather live under freedom than under tyranny.
That's right. And I'm going to do everything in my power to bring that about. And I'm inviting you to join me. Thank you.